podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, one of the world's leading international professional bodies, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide.
I'm one of your hosts, Christian van Nieuwerburgh, Professor of Coaching and Positive Psychology at the Center for Positive Health Sciences at RCSI, and I'm very interested in the integration of coaching and positive psychology.
And I'm Paula Nacif, Wellbeing Coach and Researcher and Senior Lecturer at the Masters of Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology at the University of East London.
We are delighted to bring you this 7-part series exploring the similarities and differences between coaching for well-being and health coaching.
These terms are often used interchangeably, but this series suggests they represent very distinct practices.
We have lined up some incredible guests who share their insights, ideas, and experiences in health and well-being contexts.
We aim to provide answers and understanding on this fascinating and important area of coaching and many more questions.
So Anna, here we are. It's the final episode, and we've been looking forward to just doing a little bit of reflection to see where we are now in relation to the question. So it might be a good place to start is just to find out from you, Anna, what are your thoughts now about the relationship between coaching for well-being and coaching for health?
Yes, it's been such an exciting journey, Christian, and some of our conversations have gone in different directions than the one we thought they would go. And I think that's been really a learning journey for both of us. And I have to say, I still have lots of questions. The questions, we started with questions and we're leaving with questions. Some of the reflections I have about our guests and the points that they've made is how important it is to look at this area really carefully, with a lot of care, and understanding there's different practices, coaching for well-being, coaching for health, positive health, lifestyle medicine, and the different settings that we might be taking this type of coaching, and really think about what do our clients need, what do our communities need. And each of the people we interviewed had such an amazing background in very different areas of coaching and coaching psychology. So I think the questions remain the same, because if we stop asking questions about what we do, I think then that is it, isn't it? We need to continue to reflect on our practice as the research develops and some of the theories develop as well. I still think that there is a useful umbrella of well-being to peg all of these different practices on, well-being being a wide banner of practice and also a very rich discipline when we think about it. And, it can go back to ancient Greece and philosophy, as well as economics, social sciences, psychology, coaching. So there is a richness in well-being there, and those disciplines just coming. I see it as like a big tree of well-being with all this lovely fruit hanging, underneath, and each of them have a different flavor, but are equally important for everyone's lives, really, and the way we want people to develop and be well as much as possible. How about you?
Yeah, well, I do like that, putting it all under the banner of well-being. I love it because it keeps our focus on the intention of all of the coaching we've been talking about. I would say the intention is, how can we help people to be better and live better lives and experience well-being? So that's a primary concern. And I think, through the series of podcasts that we've had, and like you, Anna, I've just been so grateful to all of our guests for sharing their insights. One thing that's emerged for me is the idea of specialist knowledge, and just wondering whether under the broader banner of well-being, we can be thinking more about what is the role of specialist knowledge and what is the knowledge people need. And this comes back to our scope of practice question, right? But what's emerging for me is that in health contexts, in addition to the knowledge and skills of being a coach, I do think specialist knowledge around the health-related topic, I think, is an advantage or maybe even necessary. So that's one way we might single that out. I've loved the conversations about ethics and this idea of moving beyond not causing harm to the idea of beneficence as well, that actually all coaching, whether it's positive health coaching or coaching for well-being, all coaching should be about making things better for people. So that's a good lens from an ethical perspective, I think. And also, I think, like you, new questions have emerged. And one of the newer questions for me is thinking about the well-being of coaches themselves and just starting to reflect on our own well-being practices and thinking about almost a responsibility for listeners of our podcast and you and me, Anna, to be more intentional and more proactive about our own well-being. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree with you. If I start with the ethics, we need to have ethics at the heart of our practice, because ethics is the everyday. Sometimes we hear the word ethics and think, oh, this is, about codes and guidelines. It isn't. It's about decisions we make every day in the coaching room. And one of them is the scope of practice that you mentioned. And for some types of coaching, we need specialist knowledge.
Yeah.
We need to understand what we're doing to then go beyond do no harm, but actually look at our clients and help them in a way that's really helpful and will benefit them. And be really honest with ourselves with what were some of the limitations of our own knowledge and where we might need to go and seek more training, have more understanding, go to supervision, talk to others, and expand the understanding of coaching in these different areas. And I think this is really, really important. We do work with humans and they're coming all with their lives. And I'm thinking about people experiencing distress in their lives, mental ill health, vulnerable communities. If you work in communities where you might be working with people, that you need to really hold on to them really carefully when you're doing that type of work. So specialist knowledge and professional humility for me is really important. There's plenty we don't know. There are questions we need to ask, and there are limitations to what we can do. And to the latter point about looking after ourselves, I think is really important, because I don't know if it's role modeling, but I think it's the effort of wanting to be well. If you work with coaching for well-being, that you're actually making that effort in your own life and you're struggling like everybody else, trying to do the best. And I like the thought that is about being well, not doing well as well. So when we think about our own health and how we feel good about ourselves, that there is a dimension of just being, which is sometimes very different from what people think about coaching, what coaching is. The coaching is about doing, achieving goals. But sometimes we just need to be still and just be and look after ourselves in that way and be really kind to ourselves. So I love that. And I think it's really, really important to encourage all of the coaches out there working with, everyone to kind of look after themselves.
Should we be role models? I used to ask the question in relation to my role as a coach. As a coach, should I be a role model? Let's say I'm in relation to whatever my client is doing. And I've come to the conclusion, no, I don't need to be a role model of how to be a leader or how to be a great educator. But I do think, based on our podcasts, it's becoming clear to me that yes, we should be role models in relation to well-being. And I love what you're saying, Anna. And, part of my well-being is related to doing well as well. The work we do is really important to me. So I want to do a good job at that. And I need to be well. So I'm inclined to think, Anna, at the moment that I would say, yes, we should be role models. And what I mean there is role models of being literate about our well-being, being interested about it, being proactive about it as well. So thanks for that provocation. It got me thinking. And coming back to this idea, which I also like, that coaching itself, whether the topic is about well-being or health, I just like the notion that coaching itself, done well, is a well-being intervention. What do you think, Anna?
I remember quite a few years back, I was delivering training for coaching for well-being. And I used to say to people well, there is no other type of coaching but coaching for well-being. I would say I'm really biased. Of course, that's my research. I did research in coaching for well-being. I'm really interested in well-being. But I agree that the intervention itself, because it helps people understand themselves better, it helps them to create a foundation for change if that's what they come for in coaching, and also explore their values, their lives, meaning, and all of those things are really important for our well-being. And is the foundation of everything. How can we achieve other things or do other things if the foundation of our well-being is not there? Or perhaps we can achieve things despite not having that foundation of well-being, but there will be consequences that might be detrimental impact. And then it goes back to our ethics, it goes back to our values and our practice. And I think the way the world is at the moment, well-being should definitely be at the forefront of our minds. We have a breaking speed of change in all fronts. We've got uncertainty that is there constantly. We've got the pressure of social media, AI, work-life blend that sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't work. I think the pace of life is so fierce that I think it's our role to kind of hold the well-being banner for our clients and for ourselves. Because to me, I think that if you think about what's the point of anything that we do in life, I think about enjoyment and meaning and being with people and all of that. If we're not well, we can't do all those things. We can't enjoy life in the same way. It goes really fast, right? So I think it's important to think that we kind of intentional in our day-to-day and we kind of appreciate enjoyment and the goodness that there is there.
Despite everything and in spite of everything, it's still possible to do that. And, I think that's such a helpful thought, Anna, because now it makes me think from a practical point of view for ourselves and our listeners. Two things kind of emerge if we have an interest in coaching for health and well-being. One is this idea of a responsibility for ourselves to look after our well-being in the way that we could be role models of that. In other words, we're interested, we're proactive, we take responsibility for our own well-being. I think that seems to become more important. And if some of our listeners need to believe that this is in the best interest of their client, in order to do that, that's okay. But of course, I believe that that's a positive end goal in its own right for us to look after our own well-being. And the intriguing idea that's emerging, Anna, is that we have a responsibility to hone our own practice as coaches, a responsibility to stay abreast of the latest research, to find ways to engage in ongoing reflective practice if we're saying that the intervention itself is a well-being intervention, which I do think it is, because like you say, we listen to people, we appreciate them, we create a space where they can do their best thinking, we build relationships with them. So if it is a well-being intervention, then it almost becomes an ethical requirement that we're making sure that our skills are as good as possible. So let's take a health context. I would feel the same way about a doctor that I go to. They're going to be there to support me with my well-being. I'd want to make sure that they're keeping on top of the latest research, that they're doing their best to be the best doctor they can be. If we turn it into the educational space, which we've also talked about, it's almost that ethical responsibility for our educators to say, well, I want to be the best possible educator I can be, so that our learners and students. So from that perspective, it adds an interesting additional dimension to why would we want to be the best possible coaches we can be. And of course, having organizations like the Association of Coaching, I think that becomes really important because it gives us a community where we can be honing our craft, supporting each other's well-being. So I really like the interplay between those two things. What are your reflections, Anna?
Oh, I love that, Christian. And also I love the sense of that we need community as coaches.
Yes.
It's really hard to keep up with all the research and evidence that is coming up, empirical data, as you know. I mean, the field of positive psychology, which is really important for well-being. I receive Google Scholar alerts and I can't read all the papers that have been published in positive psychology alone. and psychology. So keeping up with all the knowledge is very hard. So those communities of practice are important because then we can share. We're all interested in these specific areas. And if we can share the knowledge, if we can share the evidence and become very interested as professionals in what's going on, is really important. And also, I think from a well-being perspective, it's good to talk and it's good to be together. So those communities for me are really important. I love being part of communities and groups and attend events, both online and in person, because there is an energy in our community that I love and appreciate. And there is a challenge there for all of us in terms of our coaching education, which is to keep abreast of everything that's going on. We also need to perhaps think a bit more. We both work at universities, of how we bridge the academic knowledge and share that with practitioners a little bit more, perhaps, or make it more accessible and easier for people to read about and understand the latest research and developments if they are not engaged in academic work themselves, because not everyone will be and they don't have to be, but we need to create those bridges. And Association for Coaching and other organizations might have a role to play in that as well.
Yeah. Well, certainly. And I love your ideas about community and reminding us ourselves about we need to be part of a community and that we can contribute, so when we are in community, we're taking things away from it, the energy, the idea that we're all working for similar purposes. And certainly everybody listening to this podcast, we do have a shared interest, and we hope that listening to this series of podcasts has been helpful. And at the same time, to remind ourselves we're part of that community and we have so much to contribute. I just want to say something, Anna, about intentional practice. You were saying one of our responsibilities is maybe to be more intentional about our own well-being. And this is linked to a book project I've just started. And this is going to have to be careful what I commit to here. But at the moment, the idea is it's well-being practices. The book is going to be something about 31 well-being practices. And we've picked 31 so that it's something that anybody, practitioners, members of the public, professionals, anyone can try these out. And the idea is here's 31 different practices. You could try one a day for a whole month. So that was the idea. And the other idea behind this is through the Center for Positive Health Sciences, is we want to make this book available for free. So that comes back to another thing, Anna, that you mentioned, is sometimes the work in university. It's presented in a way that's not that accessible, or there's barriers to accessing such information. So we're thinking of an open access book. Anybody can download it. And the format is an interesting one because we want to go to members of our own community and just ask people, what are your current well-being practices? So rather than going into the research and looking up things, we're going to go to people and say, well, what are your practices? And we're really looking for those small practices that can be really embedded into anyone's life. So not something where you have to go spend a lot of money or buy equipment. The idea is, look, anybody can do it. And the format is, here's the skill, the practice, and then a little anecdote from the person who's using the practice. How did this come about? But we want to then link it to the research that would support why is that practice may be helpful for people. And then you also mentioned that we've been thinking about well-being for generations and maybe centuries. And so also acknowledge where is the source of that particular practice. So to give you an example, Anna, one of my practices is to set the bed in the morning. And some people might say, well, how is that a well-being practice? But for me, it makes a big difference because, wake up in the morning. One of the first things I do is set my bed. It just looks neater. It helps me avoid the snooze button phenomenon. It makes me switch into a different mindset. It starts me off with doing something successfully. So that's what I mean. It's a small practice. And I picked it when I was living in Japan because I lived in an apartment that was so small that I was sleeping in what would be the living room. So what that meant is as soon as I woke up, I had to put the bed away. So I would kind of wrap it up, sleeping on a futon. But you see, I've kept that practice, and I do believe that it's good for my own well-being. So I'm excited about, as professionals who are interested in this, sharing really implementable ideas. And as you can gather, Anna, it's not really about the practice. It's about the intention behind the practice.
I love the sharing as well, Christian, the fact that you're going to people and asking them about what they're doing rather than what we usually do as academics. We go to the research first. Whereas this is the kind of is flipping it on its head and going to people and say, what is it that you do that helps you? I like the idea of small and things that we do every day.
Yeah.
That they don't require any special equipment, money or anything like that. So everyone can be part of it. So I can see that we can set up a challenge, the Wellbeing Challenge, 31 days of well-being by when the book is out. And also, I love the fact that it's a really genuine contribution. I'm very interested in coaching for social impact and coaching for everyone rather than just people who can pay and so on. And I think that is a very generous thing to do, to kind of put it out in the world so everyone has access to it, and it's for the coaching community. But I love the idea of that.
Thanks, Anna. I love the challenge idea as well. And some of the ideas I've been hearing, they're just amazing. Walking the dog is a well-being practice. Walking in the park. I think the thing about it is it's intentional. And the curious thing is what we're hearing is sometimes people know these practices, but they don't do it when they need to do it. In other words, they'll be having a tough day. They know that if they were to just go for a 15-minute walk in the park, they know that, but then they think, no, I need to get through this other stuff. So I think the idea of intentionality is so important. And there's a cultural dimension to all of this, isn't there, Anna? Because I think positive psychology, it is at risk of this because it does come to us primarily from advanced Western educated countries, is the notion that you can just look after your own well-being. I do love the idea, and this is what we do as coaches, is we're actively involved in the well-being of others. And I think if we can contribute something just to the notion that it's actually good for our own well-being to make sure that people around us are also experiencing well-being. So that's a lovely dimension to bring, Anna.
It's so important as well, because when we look at more collectivist cultures where people understand that being with others, helping others is just what we do and it's part of feeling good and being well. And we can forget, and I think it's one of the criticisms for coaching as well as positive psychology, that it's a very individualistic practice and people talk about themselves, what they want, their own goals. But not only with social beings, we are completely embedded in a community. Unless you're living in a mountain by yourself in a very remote space, we all live with others. We interact with people constantly. We depend on people and they depend on us for many things. So it's almost like an illusion, this individualistic way of looking in the world and looking at well-being as well, because also you can rely on others to help you do those things that perhaps you wouldn't do. As you said, or people are having a tough day, they know they could go out for a walk. If they had someone, they could just say, let's go for a walk together.
Yeah.
Even if you're not in the same space, we use a headphone. It's like, let's go for a walk together. Yeah. And it's so much more fun and it's so much more doable. So yes, I love the idea of working and being with others and helping others as a way of being and part of that.
Yeah, and when you talk about way of being, I think it came up in one of our podcasts, but about this idea that it's actually really powerful for us as coaches just to sit alongside someone else as they talk about any topic, but I would say especially if they're talking about their health or well-being. That idea that for us as coaches, being fully present with them, being fully attentive to what's going on, that's actually part of the intervention. And that kind of circles back then to the idea that me as the coach, I'm not going to be able to do that unless I've done the minimum. I've made sure that my minimum needs are met. And when I'm talking about that, we can think from a lifestyle medicine point of view. That means I'm looking after what I eat. I've had a minimum amount of sleep. I've avoided substances that are not good for me. So I like the idea that we're saying any coaching is a well-being intervention, But the dimension we're adding now is it's also well-being intervention for us as coaches, that we get a human benefit from having really meaningful conversations. And, Anna, what more meaningful conversation can we have than talking about health and well-being of ourselves, those around us, our societies, and linking back to the context in which we're recording these podcasts, where a lot of what's going on around us is unhelpful to well-being or actively causing harm. It just reminds us how important this work is. And so I just wonder if we might spend a little bit of time just thinking about implications for our listeners, having had these conversations, having heard the messages about the importance of ethics, the importance of scopes of practice, the importance of looking after ourselves, the importance of being clear about what specialist knowledge. And amongst all of that, I think one of the implications that's emerging, well, we've talked about a few already. One is almost the responsibility for us to keep our practice at the forefront. The other is something about maybe, I don't know how to put it, definitely look after ourselves. But I wonder, Anna, is there an element of, in times like these, proactively looking after the well-being of other people, other professionals?
Yes, absolutely. It took me all the way back to COVID there, because it was one of the most difficult times, professional times for me as a coach. And there was nothing in comparison to the people in the front line. But I was working with healthcare professionals at the time and social care professionals in the UK. And it was so difficult to hear, and it goes back to witnessing the struggles and the suffering of others, and providing them with the space to talk about the things that were kind of haunting them and they couldn't share with anybody else. So that space was really important, and the understanding of how coaching could be beneficial for professionals across the board, I think is really important. And thinking about coaching as a wellbeing intervention itself, it goes back to my idea of wanting to take coaching to everyone as a preventative intervention or practice, whichever words and terms that kind of sit. But we have, personal trainers for physical health. Some of us go swimming, some of us walk, some of us go to therapy, some of us go and do art. And I think coaching should be one of those, another thing that people have access to be well.
Yeah.
And if you can keep professionals well, they can do a really good job for others as well. And I think it's really important. And that space to witness and be together and sit with sometimes very difficult topics is also really important. And it's outside the mental illness, mental health scenario as well, because that is a completely different proposition potentially. When we talk about organizations and communities, there is a need for us to talk to each other and support the well-being of people outside perhaps a medical setting. There is a role for coaching in medical setting, as we know in health coaching. But actually, can you imagine the benefit that we could bring to loads of people if we have those well-being conversations on a regular basis with people? There's the encouragement to take those small actions every day that makes us feel good, despite the craziness in the world and all the challenges that we all have. Life is tough, and it will be for many. And yeah, despite all of that, there is something that we can do and support each other.
You've mentioned the pandemic, and one of the ways I wanted to get through that, and I remember promising myself, I'm never going to forget what we're learning here. And I was hoping society, we'd never forget the importance of well-being, because there was a spike in interest in well-being. But my sense is we are forgetting. We have forgotten some of the valuable lessons we learned alongside all of the terrible pain and suffering that caused. So that's a helpful reminder that we've had a lesson about the importance of looking after well-being. So I wonder if the implication is, you mentioned this as well, Anna, is the also reach out, right? So if there's people listening to the podcast, and as they're listening, they're thinking, maybe I'm not looking after myself as well as I could, or I am feeling overwhelmed. And, Anna, when you talked about witnessing is tough as well. If what you're witnessing is real challenge. And I think we're seeing it in our health sector, we're seeing it in our education sector, where we've got professionals who are really stretched maybe to the limit or beyond the limit. So I think even for us as coaches who work as in well-being or in health, that really important message is reach out when you need support, because we're so used to be the providers of support. We're so used to being the providers of support that I think sometimes we think if I'm down, I have to figure it out. But how lucky are we to be part of a community of people who look after others? So I would say maybe that's an implication.
Can I add something to that, Christian?
Yes, of course.
As a coach supervisor, I make it really clear to people who come to supervision with me that that is one of the roles of supervision as well. So remembering that supervision is not just to talk about your clients or about what you're learning, but also to talk about yourself and how you're feeling and how you're coping with the work. So I think supervision can play a really important role in that. And I think supervisors, I'm going to use the word should, and I don't know if people will receive that kindly, but I think supervisors should be curious about their supervisees' well-being and how they're doing in general, rather than, what you were learning and your clients. And I think that's the main thing, is being interested and curious about the human in front of you. How are they doing? And then they can do a good job for others. And it's really important. And I think perhaps we need to remind ourselves of that as well. That one of the roles of supervision is to keep people well.
Yeah. And, the implication of that, I would say, it does actually tie together a lot of the themes that we've talked about across the episodes, is that we should be interested in professionals' well-being so that they can do their job well. But just to reiterate my point, and this is what you're saying as well, is we're interested in them being well so they can do well. And we're just interested, like you said, in the human being in front of us. And how can we convey clearly to our clients? So I'm putting this as an implication, is how can we convey beyond any reasonable doubt to our clients that we actually care about their well-being, not in some kind of transactional way? So that beautiful question, how are you, that's received with the sense that there's genuine concern between one human being and another. And like you say, and I hate to keep coming back to the world we live in, because I hope by the time people are listening to this podcast, everything's just going beautifully well. But it does feel to me that in these particularly challenging times, just somebody checking in, say, hey, how are things for you? And it can happen in coaching supervision, but it can happen in any interaction between us as coaches. So I just kind of want to come back to professional associations, networks of coaches, book clubs. Maybe that's something to dial up right now. When I have to be honest, sometimes my tendency is take myself away somewhere and try and hope that by the time I come back, things are better. But this might be a good time for us to reach out, check in with one another. And Anna, to wrap up on a positive note, I think the conversations we've been having really highlight that coaches have a pretty significant role to play beyond what's happening in their coaching conversations, which are important and impactful. We're kind of saying now that the way we think as coaches and that what we bring to conversations is something that's maybe needed now more than ever.
I totally agree with that. And I love the invitation that in a world where there is a lot of transactional communication that people get on calls and immediately, what is the business at hand? Let's get on with it. Let's get in and out as quickly as possible, that we can just take a pause and ask people how they are and really mean it and really listen to people and have space, despite the business of everyday life, to really look at human beings and see them for who they are, another human, not a transaction that needs to be completed in time or something that you need to get on over with really quickly because there are other things to attend to. I think that would really transform the experience of people and people's lives. And I think there's intentionality. I forget that sometimes when I'm busy, kind of jump on a call why am I here? What do I need to do? And I have to remind myself, so kind of asking people, how are you? And really make an effort to kind of engage with people at that human level is becoming more and more easy to forget, perhaps, because of the circumstances under which or the pressures and of day-to-day life. But it's a really important point. Love that.
Thank you so much. I think at this point might be a good moment for us to wrap up with that very human invitation that we can all provide for one another. And you said it earlier, Anna, about this kind of humility, and also that sometimes the vulnerability of saying, I'm finding it difficult also, that can be a nice way for people to be more comfortable to share what might be happening or not. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And just as we wrap up, I do want to, on our behalf, and I first of all appreciate the audience. People who have listened to us, who have gone through all of the podcasts, thanks for sticking with us. And please do share on LinkedIn the kinds of things that you're taking away from these conversations. Anna and I have taken a lot away. I'm also really grateful to Maxine and Rob. Again, on behalf of myself and Anna, we're grateful to Maxine and Rob from the Association for Coaching, who have been really patient with us because, as we've just acknowledged, we've been working through in these challenging times as well. And both Anna and I, we do work in sometimes pressurized situations. So their kindness and care and understanding has been really an important part of this. So thank you, everyone. And Anna, it's just been such a pleasure to have these conversations with you. We've been curious about this for many years. So what a joy it's been. Anna, any final thoughts?
Yes, I just want to echo and say thank you as my co-host, first of all. And it's been a real pleasure to be here and to listen to everyone who's part of this series, and extend our thanks to the Association for Coaching for keeping doing this work and putting podcasts and creating communities. That's what they're doing, and they do that beautifully. So I really wanted to thank them for that. And the people listening, keep curious, keep asking questions, and keep talking to each other, and let us know your thoughts and anything coaching for wellbeing, health that you're interested in. Let us know, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching.
For over 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society.
To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or visit our webpage at associationforcoaching.com.
Explore our digital learning hub and enjoy our extensive library of on-demand webinars, interviews, podcasts, and a portfolio of live events for your continuing professional development.